Can you believe it? We are 2/3 of the way through the legislature's special session. It's only 3 days long. And we're getting an idea of what COVID relief might look like for small businesses and who might not get it. One state representative's mockery of masks made a next viewer think about one of the worst moments in her life. So she wrote a letter.
I couldn't tell him goodbye. I couldn't tell him I loved him. I could not explain to him why I could not visit.
We meet the artist behind a unique piece of art honoring Elijah McClain. And is this your goat? He's begging for a haircut. I'm Steve Steger in for Kyle Clark. This is next. The special session of the Colorado legislature is almost over. It seems like yesterday it started. Oh, wait, that was yesterday. Colorado requires a minimum of 3 days for a bill to go from lawmakers to the governor. And one of the bills that will end up on the governor's desk will provide state money to small businesses with one glaring exception. And stop me if you've heard this before. The county where that business exists must enforce public health orders. Marshall Zellinger is reading through the legislation so you don't have to.
State lawmakers are prepared to make $37 million available to these types of small businesses, as well as business owners who are their own employee, through one of the special session COVID-19 relief bills. But there's a catch. It requires your county to be in good faith compliance with the executive orders pertaining to the public health emergency and good faith efforts to enforce or promote compliance.
Let's just talk about Weld County. What would be a good faith effort to enforce in Weld County?
Agreeing to try and abide by the executive orders and the public health orders.
Democratic Senator Faith Winter lives in Adams County, which has been enforcing the public health orders. But as we've covered over the last few weeks, Weld County commissioners have challenged the governor to enforce COVID restrictions since Weld County did not create them.
And to those businesses that are in unincorporated Weld County, I would ask that you call up your commissioners. As every politician knows, there's consequences to your decisions.
When you tie money to the following of certain orders in a state that prides itself on local control, it puts all of that control in the hands of either the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the CDPHE, or the governor's office.
Incoming House Minority Leader Representative Hugh McKean points to another part of the bill that could help business owners help themselves.
It's actually on page 3, line 10.
This section, developing a framework to certify businesses that demonstrate exemplary compliance with public health orders, is in reference to Mesa County's 5-star variance protection program, where if businesses meet certain COVID-19 safety practices, they can expand capacity beyond the county's restrictions.
There are businesses out there that need this framework in place in a week. Now, is that the speed at which government moves? Almost never. But we could get this done in, 10 days, 2 weeks.
Here's the thing about that part of the bill. It doesn't force the state to do anything. It just said that the governor's office will continue to develop that option, no mandate. So let's say you own a business or work for a small business. How does that business get money from this bill if it were to become law, which it probably will? First, you have to prove at least a 20% loss due to COVID restrictions. You'll have to apply through your county, and depending on your bottom line, you could get up to $7,000, Steve.
So if I'm hearing you right, if a business, say in Weld County, follows the restrictions, they might not have access to this money just because their county doesn't follow the restrictions.
There's an addition that if your municipality does, so if you're in Greeley and Greeley follows, you would be allowed to apply through the city of Greeley. But if you're in unincorporated and the county still doesn't prove that it enforces, there's that gray area right now that maybe you'd be left out.
Seems like something the courts might end up deciding. Marshall Zellinger, thank you. We appreciate it. This photo of Representative Larry Liston at the state capitol yesterday angered a lot of you. The Republican from Colorado Springs seemed to be joking with some of his colleagues on the House floor, wearing his mask on his head, as opposed to wearing it where it's most effective, on his face. A lot of you wrote to us about how you did not find the apparent joke funny at all. Catherine Zeeb took it a step further. Catherine recently lost her father. Now, the 99-year-old did not die from COVID, but died without his family by his side because of COVID restrictions. So Catherine decided to write a letter to Representative Liston to let him know why wearing a mask is not something to laugh about.
I'm not usually one who speaks up, and this one just put me over the edge. Mr. Liston, you obviously need to understand how to correctly wear a mask. Here is a tutorial by a much smarter Springer Spaniel. You also need to understand there's absolutely nothing funny about COVID and the impacts it has had on the Colorado community. He lived life to the fullest. We called him Crazy Walter. He was in the Army Air Corps Air Transport Company, and he flew out of North Africa. He loved people and loved kids, loved constantly interacting with people and seeing friends. He was not allowed, let me repeat, allowed to dine with his fellow independent living residents. He lost strength because he wasn't walking to the dining room. He lost cognitive abilities because he was not interacting with people. Ultimately, he fell and broke the C2 vertebra. That had us make the difficult decision to put him in hospice care. Watching so many people just make light of it and think that, oh, I don't need to wear a mask, I don't need to take precautions, I can go fly off to someplace for Thanksgiving. I don't have my dad for Thanksgiving. We lost him without being able to visit in person. I couldn't tell him goodbye. I couldn't tell him I loved him. I could not explain to him why I could not visit. Government's first responsibility is for the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Making fun of an enormously serious situation shows that you are not fit to represent the public and fulfill that duty. Here's a tutorial on how to wear a mask properly. You will note that on the top of one's head is not the proper way. I hope no one in your family becomes a victim of the pandemic and that you don't have to suffer through what my family has.
Our thoughts with the Zeeb family and everyone who's gone through something like this in this pandemic. Democratic Governor Jared Polis, he still refuses to directly criticize Mayor Hancock for ignoring public health guidance and traveling to spend Thanksgiving with his family out of state. The governor has called politicians and business leaders who refuse to follow restrictions bad actors, and Coloradans who don't wear masks selfish bastards. I asked him today if his failure to condemn his political allies' actions is hypocritical.
And what I've said in response to the mayor's travel and Congresswoman-elect Boebert having 30 plus people over for Thanksgiving is I honestly wish them well. I hope they don't get it. I hope their loved ones don't get it. That's all that can be said. Anybody who's not wearing a mask where they should, I hope you don't get it. Of course, I wish that less people traveled over Thanksgiving, and that includes the mayor.
Now, the governor held that news conference this afternoon with Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading infectious disease expert. And while he wouldn't comment directly on the mayor's actions, he certainly got his message across.
As I've always said, that mixed messaging, particularly from people in authority, is really something that countermands the kind of messaging that we like to get to people so that they understand what the appropriate thing to do. And wherever the mixed message comes from, particularly if it comes from a person in authority, is not only not helpful, it can actually be detrimental to the purpose that you're trying to get a message for.
Now, Dr. Fauci warned of a second surge in our current surge caused by all the people who traveled for Thanksgiving, mixed with people's desire to get together for Christmas. He did say he expects a vaccine could be widely available to the general population as early as April. 1,847 people are currently hospitalized with COVID-19 in this state. That's up slightly from yesterday. 241 patients have been discharged or transferred within the last 24 hours. Our positivity rate jumped over 14% yesterday. Our 7-day average is now back up to about 11.8% after it had been trending down last week. Colorado added 4,062 new cases of COVID yesterday. We're averaging about 4,150 cases per day over the last 7 days. Travelers trying to fly in and out of DIA are being met with hours-long delays after at least 4 air traffic control employees tested positive for COVID. An airport spokesperson says those delays are because the traffic control operations facility is being cleaned. In the meantime, air traffic controllers are working from another location. That's causing a ground delay. It's unclear when that delay might end. A new report just released by Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser names 9 more Catholic priests who were credibly accused of sexually abusing children in Colorado, and it includes a prominent name. The report says Father C.B. Woodrich, better known around Denver as Father Woody, sexually abused 3 boys in the 1970s and 80s. Woodrich died in 1991. The new report brings the list to 52 Catholic priests in the state with substantiated allegations of child sexual abuse, all of them from the 1950s through the 1990s. In all, at least 212 children were victimized. Now, we want to be careful about giving too much attention to a priest accused of sexual abuse, but we also believe you should know the significance of who Father Woody was. When he was alive, he was seen as a Catholic icon in Denver, and now 30 years after his death, his name is literally being erased from buildings. Here's Jeremy Hahola.
To understand how significant Father Woody was in the Catholic community in Denver, just listen to what a fellow priest said when he died in 1991.
This is his life, Holy Ghost Church, and the poor. I mean, in his own way, he's a kind of a gruff Mother Teresa.
30 years later, and just last year, we covered Christmas parties for the homeless in his name.
Father Woody always said, everyone who comes is our beloved guest.
It may not be an overstatement to say Father Woody was seen as a saintly figure in Denver in the 1980s. His funeral was packed. His work for the homeless and the poor landed him numerous humanitarian awards, an honorary degree from the University of Colorado, a Knight Who Care Award in 1984. Yet during this time, the publicly affable priest was abusing 3 boys in secret, according to the Colorado Attorney General.
He died several years before this shelter was even conceived.
A Denver homeless shelter that was not founded by Father Woody, but that bore his name for years, removed it this past summer.
You know, with the knowledge that something was coming, something of a sexual nature was coming, we had no details. Back in June, we made the decision to protect our work. And so we removed his name from our name. So we're just Haven of Hope.
Tanya Trahan, the executive director of Haven of Hope, says the shelter's work will continue.
The most important thing is that we haven't changed at all. We still continue to serve without judgment.
A legacy once embraced by the church, with the secret now bringing shame. For Next, Jeremy Hohola, 9 News.
From your mouth to Governor Polis's ears, some of you asked why prisoners would get the vaccine before grandma. We learned today that might be changing. The artist behind the latest eye-catching tribute to Elijah McClain hopes his work can spark a bigger conversation about our communities. Next. Tonight's next question comes from several of you. Rick, Chris, Danielle, and Patricia all wanted to know more about the state's plan to distribute a COVID-19 vaccine and why prisoners would get the shot before high-risk populations like older adults. So under a draft plan released by the state's Department of Health, prisoners would get the shot before some high-risk populations, but not all of them. So here's the state's outline as it stands. The first people to get the shot would be healthcare workers, first responders, and older adults in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. After that, people living in congregate housing situations like prisoners, the homeless, and students in school dorms would get a vaccine. Now, the reason really comes down to vulnerability. Prison populations are seen as higher risk for getting the virus, and several Colorado prisons have seen massive wide-scale outbreaks. And the idea is to get people who live in close proximity to other people vaccinated to try to prevent further outbreaks in those communities. Now, technically, in the state's current vaccine distribution plan, they come before an older Coloradan living at home or one with pre-existing health conditions. But that could be changing. Governor Jared Polis's office released a statement today that hinted the state may tweak the current vaccine distribution plan. Spokesperson says the governor believes that no human being, including those in custody, should be denied the vaccine. So too, no prisoner should be placed ahead of others just because they are a prisoner.
Windy and cold, but not a lot of snow just yet. That may be changing with the arrival of the second storm later tonight. Our high today actually 42. We hit that at 4:30 this morning. A second colder storm is coming in on the heels of the storm dropping south into Texas this evening. Scattered snow showers are back in the forecast. 1 to 4 inches of snow in the mountains with less than an inch expected here along the Front Range and in Denver over the next 12 to 24 hours. So really the other story is the cold. A low of 18 with cloudy skies, gusty north winds that continue tomorrow. High 31 on Wednesday, lows back in the mid-teens. Slow crawl out of the deep freeze. We're back to sunshine and 50s by the weekend, maybe even 60 degrees by next Monday.
An artist from Baltimore is traveling across the country and recently made a pit stop in Denver.
I stand in solidarity. Black lives do matter, and you really just have to put your best foot forward to kind of see what the world wants, from us.
His tribute to a Colorado man killed after an interaction with police will make you look up. He hopes the message also sticks with you long after you walk past. Next. The street art in Denver has become a megaphone for social justice. There's a piece of art down the street from the Capitol that has people looking up for answers. Our Byron Reed talked to the artist who hopes his work inspires people to think.
Like most people these days,
I'm just traveling from place to place.
Reed Beemore is finding it difficult to travel safely during the pandemic.
Honestly, I get anxiety over high frequented places, so that's the reason for the whole camping and car camping situation.
Beemore is an artist from Baltimore who's been traveling across the country for the past few weeks.
I put 7,000 miles on my car so far since I left.
Along the way, he's been stopping in various cities.
I stayed in Denver for maybe 3 days or so.
To share his artwork in a very unique way.
Every single time that we stop off, we like to make a run into a busier city just so we could stop and kind of hang some stuff up.
One of his works at 18th and Sherman.
So even though it's a 3D implement, I use the same techniques as blind contour drawing.
Is a wire portrait of Elijah McClain, a 23-year-old violinist who died after an encounter with Aurora police.
It is really heartbreaking. Something as easy as just going to the supermarket or going to the grocery store. It's difficult on various degrees.
Beemore says part of his decision to do wire installations around the country was to help bring attention to community growth.
Traveling through the southern Rust Belt and making my way up to Santa Fe and just talking to people, it's very interesting to see the various degrees at which people approach these, community situations.
He hopes his artwork will be part of a bigger conversation.
I'm from Baltimore, so I'm not shy to all the stuff that's going around in my neighborhood.
During a time when connecting with others can be a challenge.
I'm just here as an artist trying to put up work and along the way in those various pieces just sprinkle a little bit of context to help people connect with it.
For Next, I'm Byron Reed.
An impatient customer looking to get a horn cut is the most Colorado thing we saw today, and it's next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is a goat looking to get the horns trimmed and maybe a shampoo too. Miles sent us these photos today. His wife Cindy, she owns Serenity Salon in Bailey. They've had a visitor stopping by the last few days. Not sure if it's looking for the owner or if it's in need of a haircut. Apparently it's been banging the horns on the windows, definitely wants in. Animal Control said there's not much they can do, so they're trying to find the owner. Maybe you know, and we'll tell you next time.